even other debates as we're moving, as we continue the year. Okay, so break the session down into 3 parts. I'll try be as strategic and as clear as possible. I'll start off with the case construction bit. After I'm done with the case construction, I'll come back part. So let me repeat. I'll start off with the case construction and rebuttal. Then I'll move on to the extensions part. Okay, case construction. So the basic normally built of 3 parts. It normally has 1, the claim, 2, the evidence, 3, the impact. Right? So claim, evidence, impact. Very simple. So modify that simple formula to allow things like deeper analysis, understanding of the claim, or positing the claim, pushing the claim out there to the judges. With the claim, so that you guys are able to understand more or less what a good claim, in debate would look like on comparative. A couple of things here. So one, let me talk about what arguments are not, right? So what claims are not. So claims are not examples, right? So you don't start off a claim by giving an example of a situation that is existing in real life or is hypothetical. That's not a claim, right? Secondly, claims are not rhetoric. So claims are not things that you just say, things in a vacuum without substance at all. That's also not what claims are. And thirdly, claims are not questions with no answers. Guys, we're doing BP here. I don't know whether some of you have a background in world schools where they grade a bit differently, where style and content are normally separated. For BP, we are more concerned with analytical depth, right? So here, you just can't, have questions with no answers. You can't just outing rhetoric, providing examples, then expecting to get graded as claims. These are not claims, guys. So those, we've already outlawed those as things arguments or claims cannot be. Okay, critical rule here then for the judges. Judges only award these points, right? Only award an argument upon proof value of the argument needs to be done before you award that argument to a specific speaker or a specific team. So an argument isn't an argument up until it is proven, it's proven by the speaker in question or by the team in question. Pretty simple. Now, 2 parts of an argument, right? An argument, 1 or 2 things that we must necessitate the 2 features of an argument. 1, truth value. So the argument needs to be true, right? This is an integral, important thing generally across board for all arguments, no matter what they are, no matter what debate you're speaking about. The thing must be true. The claim that you're making must be true in and of itself. Secondly, right, there's a bigger question of, is this argument then important? Okay, so the importance is what normally is present when you're dealing with strategy and weighing. I think that's a whole other masterclass. Not even I think, that's an entire masterclass in its own. I think Green and the other facilities probably do that. But the reality is these 2 elements are what are normally needed for you to justify a claim or for you to have an argument in and of itself in the first place. A couple of steps then now in argument construction in and of itself. The reason I said I'm going to combine this with rebuttal is because these steps are the same steps that you must think of as you're constructing a rebuttal as well, right? First and foremost, what exactly is the premise of your argument? The premise of your argument here is simple. How did we get here? It's a bit of a background about what you're trying to prove. So, for example, let's say we are running a debate around, just give a random example. So let's say this house would capitalism as a system of, would support capitalism as the prevailing system of economic dominance in the society. So first thing you need to understand is, and then your first argument would look like something like it provides access to better opportunities for the people around or for the people living in society. The idea here is simple. You need to take us through how did we get there, or what is the background of that specific argument. So this sounds like, you know, for a long period of time, people have been living within the confines of working hard, and these people or these individuals are actually invested in gaining the most output for the hard work that they put in, right? So they're interested in a system that provides them some level of equality, also gives these individuals an opportunity that they can be able to earn money or opportunities based off of how hard they work. So ideally, it's a bit of a background as to that specific argument. I think touches into what Seneliso was talking about earlier. It's closely related to like the framing and characterization. So it's not less about the entirety of your speech. Now it's more about the specificity of your actual argument and how did you get there. Second thing, right? Why is this premise particularly true? Because I told you the truth value is one of the most integral things that matter when you're dealing with come up with multiple reasons. Debaters are talking about this thing of mechanization. Should value this thing, that kind of thing. So you need to have multiple reasons for why you're backing this thing. From a rebuttals perspective, guys, it's much easier and much more beneficial from a strategic point to have multiple reasons for why your claim is still true or why your premise is still true. Because for me to rebut your claim, I need to take down all of the material, all of the positive reasons that you provide. Tackle all of that. I need to deal with all of that. I can come and engage you, or before I can come and counter prop or debaters love doing this thing of arguing in voice. So we don't really understand why is this thing something we should value. What are the harms? What are the benefits that are present on either side of the divide? Harms and benefits is a very simple way of doing this thing called comparative analysis. For the more experienced debaters in the house, you probably understood or have gone through a masterclass in comparative analysis at some point. Harms and benefits is the simplest, easiest way of doing a comparative analysis because it's incredibly direct and it's incredibly. If you're in a tight spot and you need to do a comparative analysis quickly, the most optimal strategy to take is for you to actually go through the harms and benefits route. I think most importantly then, debate is really about the hows these things happen, how and why. Response to the question how and why is something that you hear a lot. How is this thing happening is the next question, right? So how are these harms and benefits materializing? So when judges normally give you that feedback, or when you guys get feedback from judges, they're telling you something like, you did not do enough to sufficiently prove your argument, or you didn't do enough to sufficiently prove the claim, or you didn't do enough to sufficiently show us why this thing is taking place the way you are saying it's taking place. This is the point in argumentation or argument construction that you failed in. You weren't able to take us through the how this thing actually takes place. So this is a step-by-step analysis, people. For the people I train, I normally tell them, do not be afraid of doing the legwork, right? Take us through it. They spend a lot of time there, really take us through it. For the judges in the house, on the flip side, if these individuals don't take you through this thing and you're really not able to grasp how this thing materializes, the likelihood that you're going to give them full points is very low, one. And then secondly, the speaker points, right, that you're probably going to award this individual are probably going to be lower compared to somebody who's done that legwork and who's not been afraid to evaluate. On argument construction, but an incredibly important part when you're dealing with the claims evidence and incredibly important. This is the strategic bits that you normally use to beat out other teams. Think about it like this, people. In the World's final or in PUDC final, right? All of the teams that are there, all the 8 speakers present in the final are probably, not even probably, they are at that point in time, they're Africa's best speakers or the world's best speakers at the time. These team combinations have been able to show that they are worth it to get to that final. So the likelihood that these individuals are going to run untrue things is low. The likelihood that these individuals are going to not take you through the mechanization of the steps of how these things materialize also is low. The likelihood that these individuals are not going to show you, the benefits and the harms that are present on either side of the divide is also low. So the question then becomes, as a judge, how do you judge this kind of talk? And as a speaker, how do you beat people at that level? Most of the time, it normally falls down to proving the relevancy of your argument, right? And that normally comes at the last bit of argument construction. Showing us particularly why these harms and benefits, or why this premise, or why this particular argumentation at large is particularly important in this debate in and of itself. The question of relevancy. Because your arguments are probably good, arguments are probably true, but they may be irrelevant within the context of the space that's normally of the debate that is taking place. So the idea here is simple. As a speaker, you must struggle to show the judge why, though true, we shouldn't buy these people's arguments because they fall out of the confines of relevancy. Probably they're not targeting the most affected actor that you think are pushing through the debate. Probably they're not. There's a that the judges should buy into the debate, that kind of thing. Lastly, also on strategy, this is a pro tip. Those ones, who are interested in like those going above and beyond, right? Showing us why the harm or benefit is exclusive to your team. It's something that most top teams do implicitly, because they normally try, especially with speakers when they're closing, they really try to show that level of exclusivity of the argumentation that's normally present on their side. Again, if it's something that you think you can do, please go ahead and do. Is it something you certainly should do? Yes. Why? It just gives you a bigger edge from a strategic point of view, showing why this thing is exclusive and unique to your side. Like I mentioned, it's more beneficial or more impactful specifically for closing sides, simply because closing teams have that issue of distinction, or they need to be able to distinguish themselves from their opening. So if you can do it right from the bat, from member all the way to whip, and just showing the exclusive nature of your arguments. Remember, I've said exclusivity is like the last thing. You've already done all of these things, but now you're now coming to show us exclusivity. Likelihood that you don't get fourth simply because you edge out over your opening, again, is very very high, in the debate at large. At that point in, let me take any questions before I move to the rebuttal of that. If you have anything, you could feel free to shoot it in the chat. Yeah, I'll just give like a few seconds, then I'll just proceed. Okay, I'm seeing people typing. It's great. Okay. So I'll wait for them to finish and then just continue. I hope you guys are enjoying so far. What I'm seeing is making sense. It's integral that it does, because it's not. Okay, as the people who are typing, let me touch on something around rebuttal, around the same idea, right? So rebuttals here are normally, how do you deal with rebuttals from a case construction perspective, right? So rebuttals, think about it from the alter from Ryan. Okay, the exact same activity we've done, but from the other side. So everything that I've mentioned, it is possible to disprove these things at those levels. So firstly, if you want to start with the crux of an argument, it is possible to disprove the claim. So that's one way of finding out a rebuttal, or one way of acquiring a rebuttal. Disprove the overall claim that this person has pushed for by simply saying it's not true or it's not relevant at all. Secondly, you can disprove the premise, right? So though we agree that this is something that we should talk about, we don't think that it happens like that. This is specifically integral when you're dealing with actor emotions, where the incentives of the actors are normally something that is being dealt with or is being talked about in the entirety of the debate. So disproving the premise, you're disproving the background of how this person is saying we got there. That will help you to disprove the general logic of the argument in and of itself. Thirdly, you can disprove the harms and benefits, right? So this is where now you're doing that game of probably my harm is less significant, or on comparative, my harm is your harm is long term, therefore and irreversible, irreparable, that kind of thing. Or you do this thing of saying it's not a harm or benefit at all, or even a top level strategy. Takura does this a lot, right? I call it biting the bullet. It's saying, though I agree that this is a problem, we're comfortable dealing with the problem, or we're comfortable sitting with the problem nonetheless, simply because we believe that the benefits we get far outweigh any significant harms we are probably going to get when we concede your issue. So we agree this is a problem, we agree this is a harm. We still say that no matter how bad is bad, we still are happier getting getting the benefit that we're looking for, if it means we need to be comfortable with that harm, or we need to accrue that harm in the process. Let me respond to the question now. What are some of the good ways of showing the relevancy of your arguments? Really good question, Ryan. I think a couple of things there. One, if you show that you're targeting the right actor in the right context. A lot of people fall into this trap of, especially Kenyan debaters, they really love this thing of, isn't about the most vulnerable actor people. So it's not a must that you're dealing with a struggling, the poor person in the village struggling there, walking without shoes. Sometimes the debates are really not about that person, or that person isn't the most vulnerable actor. One way of showing the relevancy of your arguments is by showing that you're dealing with the correct actor in context. I think secondly, you could show the veracity of the problem, right? So veracity of the problem here would look like something very simple. It's the idea that the issue you're dealing with is something so urgent that you need to tackle this thing right now. This is like the time to deal with it. So things like irreparability of harm that would be occasioned by not tackling this problem are things that you can use to justify urgency as a principle argument in and of itself. Yeah. So you're really trying to push for the rationale that this thing is an issue right now, and right now is the time that we must be able to deal with it. I think the third strategy that I'd say that really works for me is simply having that comparative like lens by doing things like looking at long-term, short-term analysis. Long-term, short-term analysis, definitely looking at things like the weight. Okuna is one of the finalists of PUDC from last year. Just really coming up with those balances of figuring out and biting the bullet in some instances, but taking the debate from what we call, the debate on the info slide or on paper, taking it to the ground and really telling us about the situation that these people are living in. Debaters, fast speakers who are really good at characterization, do this really, really well, because then the problem becomes less of a hypothetical on paper, more tangible, something that you can touch, live, and feel. So for speakers who are able to transcend that reality and bring the problem closer to home, that way you're able to prove the relevancy of your arguments better, simply because you're able to do a lot of, you like overcome a huge amount of burden by showing things like, by use of things like examples, and that kind of thing that just make the debate more proximate. I think lastly, intuition prompts, right? Intuition prompts are ideally like markers for the adjudicators that you're telling them, think about it like this. The question of think about it like this are what we call intuition prompts, right? So when you're dealing with intuition prompts, it helps prove the relevancy of your argument much faster, simply because you're telling them either A, this thing already happens in real life, so an example of this is this, this, and this, that then just makes it easier for the judges to, on their own, connect the logical dots. The idea here is on their own, because you're going to leave the room and they're going to have that level of That means that 9 out of 10 times you're likely to be derivative. The best speakers in the world, XK, for example, has specialized or has mastered that art of vertical extension. So she can do this in her sleep. We are not XK. I don't think anybody is even close to that. So, guys, if it's possible to avoid it, please do. But if you must, I've told you what you need to do. You need to lay out your analysis or explanation of existing arguments. However, like I keep mentioning and I'll keep mentioning again, be charitable. Mention that this is something you already know is existing. However, you're providing new material. Then please let it be new. And you, it's embarrassing if you come and tell us you're laying out new material and then you lie. Then we can flag you and then we give you OA and tell you that you lied. It's not nice for your health. Anyway, fifth way, right? Coming up with new applications of existing argumentation. This one is also a bit technical, but still doable even at a novice stage, right? For example, point out that one of opening's arguments can rebut a new point. That's how you can do this. Let me repeat this slowly so that you guys can be able to understand. To derive an extension is coming up with new applications of existing argumentation. For example, pointing out that one of opening either government or opposition's arguments can rebut a new point. Okay, so it's a new application of already existing argumentation. What does this look like? Practical example. I'm in closing government. I'm a member of MG, right? So as I'm speaking, I noticed that DPM had mentioned something that I can weaponize to take out MO preemptively, right? So I say something like having, if we agree with our opening side, specifically Deputy Prime Minister, when they mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4 in their framing. I think this is also relevant, or it's relevant to reintroduce this point at this point of time in the debate, simply because it can be able to preemptively deal with the material that we plausibly think that closing opposition are more likely to run, simply because we probably got it from a POI or something like that. Last way that you can be able to come up with an extension is issuing new criteria for judging the debate or a new defense of an existing criteria for weighing arguments. Let me repeat that slowly. Issuing new criteria for judging the debate or a new defense of existing criteria for weighing arguments. It's a fun exercise, guys. Practical example. We are dealing with a debate where the principal clashes, C1, is about principle of life vis-a-vis people's autonomy. Okay? So principle of defense of life versus autonomy, people's autonomy, right? So the judges have to, and the debate has really boiled down to that. So opposition are arguing, here is simple. We need to provide a criteria for then for the judges for why they should value one principle over the other. So I come and say, probably as government member or government whip, and I come and say something like, panel, we ought to prioritize the lives of these individuals simply because it is these people's lives that gives them the foundation for them to be able to seek any other right. Okay? So the rights that these people are demanding from opening or from opposition at large of having autonomy and maximization of choice is something that we believe they cannot be able to acquire if they are not alive. Simple intuition. You cannot, simple intuition panel, for every individual who's seeking the right to self-determination, they must be alive first for them to enjoy the benefits of these rights. Panel, therefore, this means that our principle then comes a priori to these other individuals' principle in opposition bench. So here, what have I done? When I'm defending it from government, and I've shown the relevance of this thing and the in comparative nature, then the likelihood that you're going to progress is going to be very, very low. Okay. I think I'm now done with extensions. Normally, the big problem with construction of extensions is for judges, they're not able to really figure out, or they're not able to buy into, especially the extensions that look like they're analytical in nature. They most of the time they grade these things as derivative, they're not. Secondly, for a lot of speakers, they don't worry about, or they're not cognizant of the multiple ways that you can be able to develop an extension. They normally think extensions have to be new matter all the time. Again, this is not necessarily true. Like I've listed throughout the entirety of my shorts run, I gave you 6 other ways or 5 other ways for how you can be able to list these things out or develop extensions. Judges in the house, please be cautious analysis. But these people must prove that it's new, right? Resistant argumentation is something that you should be able to credit again as an extension. For speakers, right, there are multiple ways for you to be able to bite, that bullet of extensions. Okay, at this point in time, I stop once again to ask any questions, clarity, issues. This time I'll stop for a few more seconds. Yeah. Feel free to type, guys, in the chat. I'll take all your questions and everything. I'll want to handle this really well so that we have fun on the weekend. Hope it's making sense, by the way. If it is, seeing up a couple of that's lovely. Okay. Let me proceed as I wait for them to finish up. This is the last 2 parts of the session now. What I'm about to tackle in the next will take 20 minutes. First, right? What can look like, or would rebuttal from an extension point of view look like? I think it looks like 3 things. It looks like 1, extension material pure, what I'd call pure extension material. The pure extension material here would look like you are debating the same thing, or you're talking about the same argument, but you arrive at a different conclusion or a different impact from your opening half. Let me repeat: pure extension material, right? Where you're debating the same argument as your opening, but you arrive at a different conclusion. Again, remember I told you to be charitable as you're doing these things, because not charitable. So you're arriving at a different impact from your opening. Do a meta explanation, guys. Pro tip: do a meta explanation for why this argument is particularly important. Meta explanation are those things that normally hear debaters doing, of like, oh, judges panel, this thing is valuable because of 1, 2, 3, 4. Why should you value it over that? I'm doing air quotes for those who can't see me, which is everybody. That little bit that I've said of why should you value this, or why should you, that bit that like you telling the judges the thoughts in your head, that bit is what I call meta debating, right? So always, all right, or rather, it's integral when you're talking about arguments that are already present, when you know that you're arriving at a different conclusion. Second, extensions then can be responsive themselves, can then be weaponized or turned into arguments or turned into extensions, right? So sometimes, and especially this is quarterfinals. I was in quarterfinals. My closing was IAFA. In front of me was Dovlo and everything is finished, all the material. And now I'm asking my partner, okay, what do we do now, right? because on the other side, on the same across us, we are dealing with IAFA, and we really need to be cognizant about what next step we ought to take. So what did we do? You read papers at the you just need to give up, because if opening and said everything you had thought of saying, even the ones you thought they did not think of. So that's how you can deal with that specific situation. If you go through that either this weekend or any other debate, you can turn responsive material into positive matter or positive arguments that you can then weaponize for the length of extension material. I think thirdly, like I said, the easiest stacked is completely new material. And completely new material here, would be distinct arguments, very clean, very new. You take the arguments, you take the panel rather, and the debate at large through those steps of argument construction that I took you through earlier, and provide a new material completely that leads to a totally different outcome with a new, conclusion, with new harms, benefits, new everything. So that's also something that is plausible, that is there. I think one last thing, because I'm actually done. I can take you guys as questions. How do you deal with the problem of you're in? So this is me responding to a preemptive question. Right? You're in closing, right? You're closing government whip. You're closing opposition whip, right? Your material has been dealt with. Your members' material has been thoroughly thrashed by the opposite members' speech. Think about it like this: your government whip, government members' material, your partner, has been significantly destroyed by opposition member, right? How then do you strategically use new material, not being told as whip, introducing new matter? One, return the team's premise, right? So return the premise that you had run and show why this thing is still valuable, regardless that is present, right? We do that level of weighing to prevent that level of assumption that the judge will still believe will believe the material that has come from the opposition member's case. So what does weighing in this specific instance look like? It looks like, say, because they probably rebutted you by providing a counter narrative or a counter alternative, or by simply saying that this thing wasn't as relevant enough. So do that, the legwork of doing that comparative, and say that probably they did not factor in 1, 2, 3, 4 in that premise. Therefore, they would certainly not be able to understand its truth value, and urging the panel to be able to see past those lies, or to see past whatever it is that the opposition is trying to construct for you there. But you need to be cognizant as you're rebuilding the argument. You need to be cognizant about the harm done as you're rebuilding the argument. This is where most debaters normally fail, because they're not normally cognizant about the harm that has already been present. So you just proceed as if nobody said anything, right? Your government whip, you're just back there trying to reinforce. You're like, oh, panel, we have shown that argumentation on principle of life is something that you should value here. Not acknowledging that opposition member has spent the last 7 minutes talking about how either A, your principle of life is irrelevant in this context, or has provided a counter principle and has laid out a clash there. So a lot of speakers often assume, right, that the judges still believe them or still believe their member, and still proceed then to run as if nothing has just happened. Don't be delusional. Don't be a delusional debater. It's very unhealthy for you guys. Lastly, identify the rebuttals. The second mechanism of strategic introduction of material. Identify rebuttals from the other side, hence take them out, right? Then reintroduce argumentation showing why it still stands. So this looks like this. Let me repeat slowly. Identify rebuttals from the other side, take them out, then reintroduce your arguments showing why it still stands. This is like the reverse tactic. So here you're saying, okay, first, they said that the principle of autonomy, for example, and maximization of autonomy is something that you should value. We don't think this is necessarily true or that it is necessarily important for the following 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons. Having taken this thing out, then we still believe then that the principle of life is something that you should value simply because it's something that can allow you to be able to do 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a kind of cheeky thing that then, as a whip, when I'm personally whipping, I normally try and reintroduce, or I can reintroduce a new layer of mechanism. But like at the very end, after I've already shown you, after I've more or less reiterated what my member has already said, this normally becomes very tricky when you're in closing. That's when it becomes very impactful for you to do this kind of stuff. I'm done, people. Unless there are any questions that I will be willing to take. I'll now shut up for like a long period of time, give or take like 2-3 minutes, as I wait for any questions, and then we can call it a session. I'm literally also going to mute myself as I wait for those, in case there are any. Okay, so I'm acknowledging the first question in the chat. Let me respond as I wait for the second one. How much impacting should you do in OG? Lesedi, I don't know whether I'm saying that well. A lot. You do a lot of impacting in OG. Why is this particular from a strategic point of view? OG, you're speaking fast, you must remain relevant for the next 40 minutes, right? So if your rebuttals or no, if your impacts are something that isn't particularly going to be valued across board, so you're going to hear OA of something like your impacts were not material enough, or your impacts did not stretch across a vast majority of actors, or your impacts were not as substantive. This is probably because you did that. You assumed that because you're in opening, you're not going to give significant impacting. You need to do a lot of impacting across board, regardless of which speaking position you're in, simply because, and which is much worse when you're in opening government, simply because you ought to remain relevant for the 40 minutes. You could imagine if you do bad impacting, and then I come from closing. You remember I told you one type of extension is literally arguing the same thing, but arriving at a different conclusion or a different, or arriving at a different conclusion or a different impact. I'm going to seriously outweigh you through vertical extension, right? If you end up not doing significant impact. Bottom line, do a lot of hard work regardless of which position you're in. Secondly, this by the doctor. Wow. Give me a moment. Give me a moment. Yep. Apologies. Okay. Oh, they said you're welcome. Close. I think this is what we call what's her name? It's not her. Yeah, it should be Hadar. Hadar gives a masterclass in opening, how to win from opening government. You guys can find it on YouTube, right? She gets opening in almost all of the major finals she's in, whether it's European, Universities Championship, or even WGC. Even the finals they proceeded to last year, not the 2020, not the Vietnam one, the Madrid one. They also were in opening government, right? So the idea here is simple. You need to do a lot of legwork. Okay, if I was to summarize it in 3 ways, I'd say one, I also have that curse of opening, by the way. Gosh, how do I do it? One, be thorough, right? From opening government, especially, you need to be incredibly thorough with the amount of work that you're doing. You need to be thorough with characterization. You need to be thorough with analysis, especially analysis. Make sure that there are no analytical gaps that you're leaving for the other teams behind you to come and exploit. Two, right? You must be incredibly analytical to the extent where you're proving why everything is happening the way you're saying it's happening, right? So analysis is also incredibly integral for opening speakers or for opening half, simply because if you leave any of those gaps, you open yourself up, providing room for the people behind you to come in and take extension. Three, it's about team dynamics, right? So from a team dynamics lens, you ought what I try and do with my partner, we try and split a few things here and there, especially if we're in OG. So I tell him I'll probably cover 1, 2, 3. Assuming we had 4 points, 4 substantive, I'll probably cover two and doing the framing and characterization and stuff. Then he does the responsive work while doing integrated rebuttal as he's pushing the other 2 positive material. So it's about division of labor also. Just so that you make sure that you've run every possible thing that could possibly be run there. Again, this is a strategic move. It doesn't work in all instances. So you just need to be cautious about who you're debating with, what the motion is about, and that kind of thing. That's, I think, the doctor's response. Ryan, can CEO bring out, can a CEO, can you bring in a problem that has been left out? Incredibly dangerous, possible but incredibly dangerous. These are normally what we call first or fourth tactics. Juguna Masharia is really good at doing this. Why? Because the likelihood that he's going to win in a room is quite high, right? So he'll probably bring up some, and then you normally hear debaters saying like this phrase of the debate in opening half has been messy. We were waiting for closing government to come and save government's case, but they have done nothing so far. It is a bit unfortunate that we're going to start the debate from closing opposition, because this debate is about, and then you proceed to run that thing. It only works, very possible, it's a strategy, it's a strategic move, very possible and can work, only if you're right. Only if you're right. Why? Because you run the risk of 3 things. One, you're viewed like you're running arguments in isolation, simply because other teams cannot then respond to your claim for closing up. Secondly, the likelihood that you are the one who is right from CO after 40 minutes is also very, very limited, right? Probably CG can run something like that because, opening half was actually as messy as, it happens. Sometimes in debates, opening half is actually that messy. But the likelihood that something very new and very amazing and very, is coming in from CO, not really. So try and avoid this, what is a strategic move that has been left out from CO. Yes, if it serves your purpose and if you really work hard to prove, in a debate you can do anything, really. You just need to prove that this is something that we ought to value. It's not against the manual's regulations, and especially from member, you have that capacity to produce no matter. Just make sure it's still comparative, make sure it's still valuable, and make sure you take as many POIs or offer an opportunity for engagement as much as possible. Give me a second before I respond to the next questions. Right. Okay. Wow, I'll probably butcher this name. This is Ernest Swishe. Okay. May you please give us the YouTube link, please, if I have it. Sure. Differences between rebuttals and clash resolutions in member speech and whipping in whip speech. Oh, this is an amazing question. A lot of debaters, even seasoned ones, get this wrong. So rebuttals and clash resolutions, right? In member speech and whipping. Look at it like this, right? You can resolve a clash without particularly rebutting anything, right? Because remember, I've given you multiple ways you can be able to address these things. Like, for example, doing a weigh up on relevancy, you're not particularly rebutting anything. I'm actually agreeing with you and saying it is true, but saying though true, right? We can be able to look at this from like another lens, or my principle is more pragmatic, principle is more powerful, or to be valued more than what you're pushing for, right? So here the difference is simple. Clash resolutions can still take place in debate without necessarily rebutting anything. You just need to mention why you still think that this thing should be remain relevant in the, and this can be done using positive matter, right? You need not be able to. You need not do it with. You need not do it through the rebuttal lens or through looking for negative material or running anything. Best example for this would look like running be able to do to resolve a clash, right? So probably look at it like this. Clash resolution most of the time takes place in closing or from the deputy speeches. So you run in opening, or either in opening or your first speaker has run material that is talking that the premise has not been particularly clear, or the other team is coming to oppose the premise. You could do legwork with regards to reconstruction of the premise, or doing that what we call reconstruction work that I was telling you about earlier. So if you're doing legwork in reconstruction work that achieves the aim of clash resolution, you're not necessarily doing rebuttal, but at the same time you're still resolving it. From a whip's perspective, I think whips have the capacity to do both things. They have the capacity to do both rebuttal and clash resolution. The thing here that's normally problematic is you whips don't like doing the legwork, and they don't like doing the signposting. You must be incredibly deliberate. As you're moving into clash resolution, you must mention that this is clash resolution. So I'm not introducing new matter. This is something that has already been agreed upon or present within the context and context of the debates as is. All I'm doing is coming to add in my voice. So it's not new matter. It's a new perspective of how to look at it. Yeah. Second. Okay. I think this particular particular